My name is Grace, and I'm a 37-year-old interior designer living in San Francisco. Life wasn't always complicated, and for a long time, it felt like I had everything figured out. I had loving, supportive parents who believed in me, and a thriving career I was proud of. But all of that changed the day my parents passed away unexpectedly. Their sudden death shook me to my core. I felt like the ground had been ripped out from beneath me. But amid the grief and loss, something else was waiting for me, something that would change my life forever. When they passed, they left behind more than just memories. They left me a thriving family business worth $75 million. The business was their legacy, a reflection of their hard work and dedication. It wasn't just a business. It was their gift to me, a symbol of everything they had sacrificed. In a way, it was a part of them that would always be mine, something I was supposed to protect and honor. At first, my husband, Adam, and I were united in managing the business together. We were working hard to keep everything afloat, ensuring we did right by my parents' memory. For a while, it felt like we were on the same page, building something meaningful from their legacy. But that feeling didn't last long. The moment my mother-in-law, Veronica, found out about the inheritance, things started to change. Veronica had always been cordial with me, but there was a distant edge to our relationship. I wasn't surprised when her congratulations turned to something more transactional. I thought it was a simple gesture at first, a polite recognition of our success. But Veronica's demeanor started to shift. She began making comments about how we should share the wealth, and how the family business should benefit everyone, not just me. I tried to ignore it, hoping it was just a phase. But soon enough, her words grew sharper, more demanding. She even started planting seeds of doubt in Adam's mind, suggesting that we should use the business's resources to fund family luxuries, things like expensive vacations and lavish homes. I felt the tension growing in our marriage, and it wasn't just about money. It was about control. Veronica wasn't just asking for help. She was trying to take over everything my parents had built. One afternoon, Veronica showed up at our house unannounced. Her usual polite demeanor was gone, replaced with something more assertive, almost aggressive. I was in my study, reviewing design concepts for a client when she walked in. Without even saying hello, she sat down across from me and got straight to the point. "Grace," she began, her tone businesslike, "I think it's time we talked about the future of the family. The business your parents left you is a great opportunity, but I think it's only fair that we all share in it." My stomach dropped, but I kept my composure. "What do you mean?" I asked carefully, setting my papers aside. "I've been thinking," she continued, her voice growing more confident. "This business could do so much more for the family. We should use some of it to invest in a luxury home, a place for all of us to gather, something fitting for our family's status. I'm thinking around $12 million should be enough." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "This business isn't just about money," I said, trying to keep calm. "It's my parents' legacy. They worked their whole lives to build it. I can't just give away that much for personal indulgence." Her smile tightened. "So you're saying no? You're not willing to help your own family?" I shook my head in disbelief. "This is about preserving their legacy, not using it for luxury homes. This isn't a bank." She crossed her arms and glared at me. "You wouldn't even have this business if it weren't for our support after your parents passed. And this is how you repay us?" Before I could respond, Adam walked into the room. I turned to him, hoping for some support, but he just stood there silently, looking uncomfortable. "Adam," I said, my voice tight, "tell her why this isn't possible." Adam hesitated. He shifted from foot to foot, clearly torn. "Maybe we should at least talk about it," he said, his voice soft. "We could consider a compromise." I felt a cold shiver run through me. "Compromise?" I repeated. "This isn't just about money, Adam. This is about what my parents built with their blood, sweat, and tears. This is their legacy, not something to be spent on a mansion." Veronica's face darkened. "Listen to your husband, Grace," she sneered. "Family comes first, and you're clearly just trying to hold everything for yourself." At that moment, I realized I was fighting not just for my parents' legacy, but for my marriage. I turned to Adam, hoping he would finally see the truth. "You can't be okay with this," I pleaded. "This isn't about the money. It's about honoring my parents. Don't you get it?" But he didn't respond. He just stood there, looking at the floor. His silence hurt more than anything Veronica could say. "I just don't want to be stuck in the middle," he murmured. I felt my heart break at that moment. "Stuck in the middle?" I whispered. "You're my husband, Adam. You're supposed to stand by me, but you're standing by her." Veronica's voice grew colder. "Well, clearly you've made your choice," she said, her words cutting like a knife. "But don't think this is over. We'll be back." She stormed out of the room, and Adam followed her, leaving me standing there, alone and heartbroken. That night, I realized something I couldn't ignore anymore. My marriage was falling apart, and my mother-in-law was the catalyst. The weeks that followed the confrontation with Veronica were nothing short of suffocating. My home, once a place of peace and warmth, now felt like a battlefield, and my marriage, once a partnership I could depend on, had become a strained, distant connection. Every day seemed like a new battle, with Veronica's passive-aggressive comments and manipulation wearing me down bit by bit. It wasn't just the things Veronica said, though. It was how Adam stood by, silent. His refusal to take a stand made the tension unbearable. He never directly sided with his mother, but his inaction was just as damaging. The more time passed, the more I could feel the growing distance between us, like an emotional chasm that neither of us seemed able to bridge. I would ask him about his family, about his mother's latest demands, and he would just shrug it off, saying, "I'm just trying to keep the peace, Grace." But how could peace be kept when one side was demanding everything and the other was quietly accepting it all? It felt like I was fighting a battle alone, fighting to protect my parents' legacy and my own dignity, while he just wanted to keep his mother happy. One evening, after yet another heated argument about how things should be handled with the family business, I found myself sitting alone in the living room, wondering if this was really the life I had signed up for. The business, my parents' hard work, was slipping further out of my grasp, not because of my own shortcomings, but because of the relentless pressure from Adam's family. They didn't understand what this business meant to me. It wasn't just money or property. It was a symbol of my parents' dreams, their sacrifices. But all they saw was a pot of gold waiting to be divided. And then came the day that changed everything. It was an ordinary afternoon. I was sitting in my study, working on the designs for a new client, when I heard the familiar rumble of a moving truck pulling into the driveway. I didn't think much of it at first. Maybe it was a delivery or something for the business. But then I saw her, Veronica, stepping out of the car with a smug expression on her face. Behind her was Mary, Robert's sister, and Thomas, his cousin, and they weren't alone. A team of movers followed them. My heart skipped a beat, and my stomach sank. They were here to take over. I didn't even need to ask. I knew exactly what was happening. Veronica's plan had escalated beyond just trying to get me to share the inheritance with the family. She wasn't asking anymore. She was taking action. I stood up, my legs shaky, and walked to the front door. I opened it just in time to see Veronica approach with that all-too-familiar air of self-assuredness. She didn't even wait for an invitation. "Ruth," she began, as if this was some kind of business transaction. "We're here to set things right." I could hardly believe my ears. "What do you mean, set things right?" I asked, my voice shaking with disbelief. "This house, Ruth," she continued, her smile sharp. "It's time this house, and everything in it, became part of the family's future. These movers are here to help expedite the process." I felt a surge of anger that almost left me speechless. "This is my property," I said, crossing my arms and planting myself firmly in the doorway. "And you have no right to be here." Veronica's smile didn't falter. "No right, Ruth? Don't be so dramatic. This is a family business and you're acting like a tyrant. If you won't willingly share, we'll take matters into our own hands." Mary, standing just behind Veronica, stepped forward. Her voice was sharp and hostile. "Just step aside, Ruth. It's for everyone's benefit." I took a deep breath, trying to hold my ground. "If you don't leave right now, I'll make sure you regret it," I warned, my voice steady despite the chaos raging inside me. Veronica's smile faltered, but she quickly regained her composure. "And how exactly will you manage that?" she asked with a mockingly raised eyebrow. Without hesitation, I pulled out my phone and dialed 911. "This is Ruth Blake," I said, my voice firm. "I have individuals trespassing on my property, violating a court-ordered restraining order. They're attempting to take possession of my home. I need police assistance immediately." Veronica's confident facade cracked for a split second. She crossed her arms and glared at me, but she remained silent as I spoke to the operator. The sound of sirens soon filled the air, and moments later, 2 police cars arrived, their lights flashing brightly against the dimming afternoon sky. I met one of the officers at the door, handing him the restraining order. "These individuals are violating the order," I explained calmly. "They're attempting to take possession of my property without any legal right." The officer nodded, turning to Veronica. "Ma'am, you are trespassing on private property and violating a legal restraining order. You and your group must leave immediately, or you will face legal consequences." Veronica's composure shattered. "This is ridiculous," she protested. "She's blowing everything out of proportion. This is a family matter. There's no place for the police here." The officer remained unfazed. "If you refuse to comply, you'll be arrested." Veronica hesitated, her eyes narrowing in fury, but the officers stood their ground. After a moment, she motioned for Mary and Thomas to back off. They didn't leave without one final glare from Veronica, though. "This isn't over, Ruth," she hissed. I stood firm, watching as the officers escorted them off the property. For the first time in weeks, I felt a sense of control return. They may have tried to take what was mine, but I was ready to fight for everything my parents left me. As the sun began to set, I closed the door behind me, feeling the weight of the situation lift just a little. This was my home, my inheritance, and I wasn't going to let anyone take it from me. The next few days were a whirlwind of emotions. My mind kept replaying the confrontation with Veronica and the police. My hands still trembled when I thought about how close I had come to losing everything my parents had worked so hard for. The mansion wasn't just a building to me, it was the embodiment of their legacy. It was where I had grown up, where their love and sacrifices had shaped me into who I was. To think that Veronica, and by extension, Robert, could take it all away was a nightmare I couldn't shake off. But that wasn't the end of the battle. It was just the beginning. Robert and I barely spoke in the days following the incident. When he came home that night, his face was a mixture of confusion and regret, but he didn't have the words to explain himself. His silence was a suffocating weight between us, and I couldn't ignore it any longer. "I did what I had to do, Ruth," he said one evening, his voice quiet and worn. "I didn't want to hurt anyone." I stared at him, trying to hold back the tears that threatened to spill. "You didn't want to hurt anyone. Robert, you let your mother and family walk all over me, and you did nothing. Not once did you stand up for me. For us. How can you look me in the eye and say that?" He looked down at the floor, as though he couldn't face me, his voice barely a whisper. "I didn't want to pick sides." "Then you picked her side," I spat, my voice breaking under the weight of everything I had been holding in. "You chose to stay silent when I needed you most, and now you're telling me that you didn't want to hurt anyone?" He didn't answer. His silence was the loudest response, and it cut deeper than anything he could have said. I had always believed in us, in our partnership. But this was beyond what I could forgive. The emotional distance between us had become undeniable. With every passing day, the foundation of our marriage cracked further. I was left with nothing but the remnants of a relationship that had once felt unshakable. Veronica's manipulation, combined with Robert's refusal to stand by me, had broken something that I wasn't sure could be fixed. The tension at home became unbearable, but I refused to back down. I couldn't. This was my battle now, and no one was going to take away what was rightfully mine, what was rightfully my parents'. But that didn't stop them from trying. A week later, I walked into the living room to find Robert and Veronica's sister Mary standing together. Robert's face was blank, but Mary looked every bit the part of an aggressor. I knew, in that moment, that something had changed. Veronica had reached out to them again, and I could feel the mounting pressure on me. The family wasn't done. They were regrouping and plotting their next move. Mary stood with a determined look, her arms crossed in front of her as if she were about to wage a war. "Ruth, we need to talk," she said, her voice sharp. "This nonsense has to stop. The business was never meant to be just for you." I felt a surge of anger flood my chest, but I kept my composure. "What do you mean by that, Mary?" I asked, my voice steady, though my insides churned with frustration. "The business has always been a family affair," she continued, her tone dripping with entitlement. "You can't just keep it all to yourself. You know Robert has his share in it, and the family should have a say in how it's managed." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. They were still trying to take it from me after everything. "No, Mary," I said, my voice firm. "The business is my parents' legacy. They worked for it. They built it for me. I am the one responsible for it, and I will not let you or anyone else dictate what happens to it." She scoffed. "You're hoarding it, Ruth. You can't even see how selfish you're being, can you? The family is struggling, and you're sitting here pretending this is all yours." The words stung, but they didn't break me. "I'm not pretending anything. I'm taking care of what my parents left behind, not just for me, but for everyone. The employees, the community, the people who depend on it." Her eyes narrowed, and for a moment, I saw the full extent of her bitterness. "You're being ridiculous. If you won't share, we'll just have to take action." The threat was clear. They weren't backing down, and neither was I. That night, I called my lawyer, Mr. Ryan, the man who had been a constant support to my parents. I recounted everything, from the initial attempts to manipulate me to the slap from Veronica. "Mr. Ryan's response was quick and decisive. "Ruth, this is unacceptable," he said. "We need to act immediately. It's time to file for a restraining order against them." It was the first time in weeks that I felt like I was taking control again. The restraining order wasn't just a legal tool, it was a statement. I wasn't going to let them intimidate me any longer. The following day, we filed the order. I felt a sense of relief, knowing that if Veronica or anyone else came near me or the business again, there would be consequences. But even though I had legal protection, the emotional toll was taking its toll. Robert's continued silence was eating away at me. I couldn't understand how he could stay so passive, how he could continue to side with his family while watching them tear me apart. When he came home that night, I was ready to confront him again. "Robert," I began, my voice steady but laced with frustration. "I can't keep living like this. I need you to choose. It's either me or them." His face fell, and he ran a hand through his hair, a gesture of uncertainty. "I don't know what to say, Ruth. I don't want to lose my family." "But you've already lost me," I said, my heart breaking with each word. "You've already chosen them over me, over our marriage. Every time they cross a line, and you do nothing, it's a choice." His silence was suffocating. I felt the finality of my words hit me, but it wasn't enough to change anything. That night, I packed his things. I knew, in my heart, that I couldn't continue living like this. I couldn't keep fighting for a marriage that was already gone. When he returned home, he found his things packed, waiting for him to leave. "Ruth," he said, his voice filled with desperation, "I don't want to leave." I looked at him, the weight of everything we had been through settling heavily in my chest. "You already have, Robert," I said quietly. "You already have." And with that, he left. For the first time in years, I was alone in the mansion, but it wasn't a feeling of emptiness. It was the beginning of something new, something I hadn't felt in a long time. Freedom. This was my fight, and I was finally standing tall, ready to protect what was mine. It was a strange feeling, walking through the house alone that night. The silence that once felt suffocating was now a relief. The weight of my decision to ask Robert to leave was heavy, but I knew deep down it was the right choice. It wasn't just about the business anymore. It was about protecting my sanity, my dignity, and my parents' legacy. I had spent too long letting others dictate my life, and now, finally, I was taking control. The days following Robert's departure were filled with a mix of emotions: relief, exhaustion, anger, and uncertainty. But through it all, one thing remained clear. I was done being pushed around. This mansion, the business, the life my parents had built for me, it was all mine. And no one, not even Robert, was going to take it away. I spent the next few days surrounded by the quiet hum of the house, taking long walks around the property and reflecting on everything that had happened. The mansion, which once felt like a symbol of love and family, had become a battlefield. But now, it was a reminder of my strength, a place where I could rebuild and start fresh. The business was the next thing I needed to focus on. It had always been my parents' pride and joy, and I wasn't about to let it fall into the wrong hands. I called Mr. Ryan again to discuss the next steps. He reassured me that the restraining order would protect me from further interference. But I knew there was more I had to do. I needed to reestablish myself as the rightful owner and secure the future of the business. One of the first decisions I made was to bring in a new team. My parents had trusted certain people, but after everything with Robert and his family, I couldn't trust anyone who had been involved with them. I hired a new team of accountants, lawyers, and business consultants to review everything and ensure the business was on the right track. I didn't want to risk losing control again. But it wasn't just about business. I needed to heal emotionally too. The betrayal from Robert, his family's relentless demands, and the emotional toll it had taken on me couldn't be ignored. So, I began focusing on myself. I started therapy, something I'd always been hesitant to try, but it felt necessary now. I needed to work through the anger, the hurt, and the feelings of abandonment. Therapy helped me realize something important. I had spent so much of my life putting others first, letting them dictate my happiness and my worth. But I was worthy of more. I was deserving of respect, of love, and of my own happiness. I didn't need anyone's approval to move forward. I just needed to believe in myself. It wasn't easy. Some days, the grief of losing Robert weighed heavily on me. There were moments when I questioned whether I had made the right decision. I missed the good times we had, the moments of love and partnership. But those moments were clouded by the pain of betrayal, and I knew deep down that I couldn't live in the shadow of his family any longer. The day I made the call to the contractors to start the renovations on the mansion, I felt a spark of hope. The house, once filled with tension, was about to become a place of new beginnings. I wanted it to reflect who I was now, strong, independent, and ready to take on the world. I designed every room with purpose. The walls were stripped of the past and painted with bright, welcoming colors. I wanted every corner of the house to feel like a fresh start. At the same time, the business was thriving. My decisions were paying off, and with the help of my new team, I could see my parents' dream coming to life again. The employees were happy, the customers were loyal, and I was making the right moves to expand. It felt like a victory, a reclaiming of everything that had been taken from me. But even as everything seemed to be moving in the right direction, there was still the lingering threat from Robert's family. Veronica, though silent since the restraining order, still had the power to make things difficult. And I wasn't naive enough to think that just because she had backed off for now, she wouldn't strike again. A week after the renovations had begun, I received a call from Mr. Ryan. The tone of his voice was serious, and immediately, I knew something was wrong. "Ruth, I need you to come to my office as soon as possible. There's been a development. I think it's time we discussed your next steps." My stomach dropped. I didn't need to ask what had happened. It was the same feeling I'd had when I first found out about the attempts to take the business from me. This wasn't over, not by a long shot. When I walked into Mr. Ryan's office, he was standing by the window, his face a mask of professionalism. "Sit down, Ruth," he said, gesturing to the chair across from him. "There's something you need to know." "What's happened?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. He sighed and sat down, folding his hands on the desk. "Veronica, along with some of her associates, is trying to get their hands on the mansion. They're making moves behind your back. We've tracked some of the documents she's filed, and it seems she's trying to force a sale of the property through legal channels. I felt the blood drain from my face. "What do you mean, force a sale?" I asked, struggling to keep my voice steady. "She's using her connections, Mr. Ryan explained. "She's claiming that the mansion should be sold and the proceeds should be divided among the family. It's a legal maneuver to try and seize control of the property. She's trying to go over your head, Ruth." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. The audacity, the pure desperation to take what wasn't theirs. I had thought that the restraining order would put an end to it, but Veronica was still relentless, and this time, she had an army behind her. I stood up from the chair, pacing back and forth in the office, my mind racing. I had no choice. I needed to fight back, harder than ever before. This wasn't just about a house. It was about everything my parents had worked for, everything I had worked for, and I wasn't about to let her or anyone else take it from me. "Mr. Ryan," I said, my voice steady now, filled with resolve, "do whatever it takes. We're not backing down. I will not let them steal this from me." He nodded, his face serious. "I'll make the calls. We'll file the necessary paperwork and make sure you're protected. This ends here, Ruth." And so, the fight continued. The battle wasn't over yet, but I was ready to face whatever came my way. Because I had something Veronica didn't, something no one could take away: my parents' legacy, my strength, and my determination. The days after my meeting with Mr. Ryan felt like a whirlwind. As the legal battle intensified, I found myself deep in paperwork and strategy, navigating a world I never thought I'd be part of. It wasn't just about defending my parents' legacy anymore. It was about protecting everything I had built for myself. Every decision, every call I made, felt like a crucial step in this battle. I couldn't afford to hesitate, not when so much was at stake. But even as I worked tirelessly to defend the mansion and the business, there was something more pressing on my heart: the loneliness. Despite the progress I was making in reclaiming what was mine, the absence of Robert felt like a constant ache. He was my husband, the one person I thought would stand by me through thick and thin, yet his silence and distance were like an unspoken betrayal. He wasn't just absent physically, he had become absent emotionally, and it was becoming harder to ignore. I couldn't deny the truth anymore. Our marriage had changed. His inability to stand up for me, to protect me from his family's attacks, had created a distance I wasn't sure we could bridge. I had tried everything: talking, pleading, hoping he would see things from my perspective. But all I received in return was silence and indecision. It wasn't enough anymore. The legal team had sent over the latest updates, and things were moving quickly. Veronica's attempts to seize control were more desperate, and now she was starting to make threats. She was attempting to manipulate the system by claiming I was incapable of managing the estate, hoping to have the business put into the hands of someone else. Every letter, every threat she sent, only made me more determined to fight. I had already lost enough. I wouldn't lose everything. One evening, after hours of reviewing legal documents, I received a call from Mr. Ryan. His voice, though calm, was filled with urgency. "Ruth," he said, "there's been a new development. I need you to meet me tomorrow at the office. We've found something that could change the course of everything." The call left me restless. I couldn't sleep that night, my mind racing with possibilities. What was this new development? Had Veronica made her move again? I didn't know what to expect, but I knew one thing for sure: I had to be ready for whatever came next. The next morning, I drove to Mr. Ryan's office, my thoughts heavy with anticipation. When I arrived, he was already waiting for me, his expression grim. "Ruth, we've traced some of Veronica's financial dealings. She's trying to push through a fraudulent claim, one that could take away everything you've worked for. We need to act quickly." A chill ran through me as I listened to the details. Veronica had been working behind the scenes, trying to manipulate financial records and create false claims about the estate. It was an act of desperation, but it was still dangerous. This wasn't just a legal matter anymore, it was personal. Veronica had crossed a line. "We have enough evidence now to move forward," Mr. Ryan said, his voice steady. "We'll file a counterclaim, and we'll make sure she's held accountable for these actions." I nodded, my mind clear and focused. This was the moment I had been preparing for. I wasn't just going to let Veronica destroy everything my parents had built. I was ready to fight back, with everything I had. As I walked out of the office, I felt a renewed sense of purpose. The mansion, the business, it wasn't just about money. It was about honor, about preserving my parents' dreams, and about standing up for myself in a way I never had before. The days that followed were filled with legal meetings and endless paperwork, but for the first time in months, I felt like I had control. I had found my voice, and I wasn't going to let anyone silence me. Even if Robert wouldn't stand by me, I would stand strong for myself. As the legal battle raged on, I focused on rebuilding my life. The business continued to thrive under my leadership, and I was more determined than ever to make it a success. The house, too, was becoming a symbol of my resilience, a place where I could rebuild, not just my home, but my life. Each day felt like a step forward, and I knew that no matter what, I was going to come out of this stronger than before. Veronica might have tried to take everything from me, but she didn't realize one thing. I wasn't going to let her. Not now. Not ever. This was my fight, and I was ready to win it. The day of the court hearing arrived with a sense of finality I hadn't felt in a long time. I stood in the courtroom, ready to face the culmination of months of legal battles. Veronica's attempts to seize control had been relentless, but today, I knew, would be different. I had fought for everything that mattered, and now I was ready to see justice done. The courtroom was tense, the air thick with anticipation, as the judge listened intently to the evidence. Mr. Ryan's argument was clear and strong, detailing Veronica's fraudulent actions and attempts to manipulate the system. As I sat there listening to the unfolding case, I felt a strange calm. I had done everything I could. The rest was out of my hands. Finally, the judge turned to Veronica. Her face was pale, her demeanor defensive, but there was no denying the weight of the evidence. When the ruling came, it was a moment I would never forget. The claims made by the defendant are unfounded, the judge said. I find in favor of the plaintiff. Veronica Blake will face legal consequences for her actions. A wave of relief washed over me, the tension in my chest easing for the first time in months. Veronica had lost. The estate, my parents' legacy, and everything I had fought for remained in my hands. It wasn't just a legal victory. It was a victory for everything I had worked to rebuild. As I left the courtroom, a sense of freedom filled me. I had faced the storm and come out on the other side stronger. The mansion was no longer just a place of memories. It was a symbol of my resilience, a new beginning. Robert, on the other hand, had disappeared from my life. I hadn't heard from him since the day I told him to leave. His silence was his answer. In the end, I realized that I didn't need him to stand strong. I had learned to stand on my own, and that was all I needed. The future was still uncertain, but I no longer feared it. I had reclaimed my life, my legacy, and my independence. With each step forward, I knew I was building something that could never be taken away from me. The road ahead was mine to shape. Story 2. Lily frequently lost herself in her childhood's melancholy recollections. Her mind kept returning to the day when her world was irrevocably altered. Even though she was only 6 years old when her father, Arthur, died, she could still vividly recall that spring morning. It had begun as one of their most joyful mornings as a family. Arthur was at the stove, flipping pancakes into fanciful designs while sporting his favorite apron, moons, stars, even happy faces. As he gave each pancake character a humorous voice, Lily perched on a stool and giggled. Sarah, her mother, was busy preparing the table for their comfortable morning routine while humming quietly. "Come assist your old dad with flipping these works of art, princess." Waving his spatula like a wand, Arthur yelled. Leaving her pet rabbit on the couch, Lily sprung to her feet with excitement and hurried to the kitchen. Then, however, things changed suddenly. The spatula hit the floor with a dull thud, and Arthur's smile wavered. His face twisted in agony as his palm gripped his chest. Before he passed out, he managed to mumble, "Sarah." As her mother yelled and ran to her side, Lily froze in astonishment. The next seconds were a frenzied haze of flashing lights, Mad Bates showing up, and a neighbor escorting Lily out. In their little household, Arthur's passing created a hole that seemed like a deep wound. Once vibrant and vivacious, Sarah spent months withdrawing into herself. There was stillness and darkness in their house. However, Metro Pierre's life continued. Sarah finally got married again. A sweet and compassionate man who worked as an archive, Richard came into their life. Although he wasn't Arthur, he made an effort to restore normalcy to the family. He developed a peaceful relationship with Lily by introducing her to old tales and customs. The fragments of their shattered lives began to slowly come together. However, nothing would ever be the same. The burden of Lily's history would influence everything that came after, and her journey was only getting started. When Lily's mother sat her down one evening when she was 8 years old, her face lit up with happiness. "You will become an older sister," Sarah declared, covering her expanding tummy with a protective palm. Lily didn't know how to feel both anxious and thrilled about a baby. How this would alter their already delicate family dynamic was beyond her comprehension. There was a new spirit in the home when Tommy was born. The hallways resonated with his shouts. He waved his little hands as though to announce his presence. Sarah was ecstatic and devoted all of her time to her baby. In an attempt to get closer to her mother, Lily first tried to participate by assisting with diapers and making goofy expressions to amuse Tommy. However, Lily immediately noticed a change. Tommy took up all of her mother's attention, leaving her with little space. It began modestly. "This is a lunch that was forgotten. There's a story about a missed bedtime. I'm so sorry, my love," absent-mindedly her mother would say. Simply said, "Tommy has kept me very busy." Then there were the more significant ones, such as missing Lily's school performance. She had been eagerly anticipating her mother's beaming grin from the crowd. Richard was clapping from the back row instead. Tommy wasn't feeling well, so Lily's mother dismissed it when she brought it up later. "Don't you understand?" Richard made every effort to halt, and where Sarah didn't measure up. He went to Lily's karate competitions. When she received a new belt, she cheered more loudly than everybody else. In an attempt to make her feel noticed, he would take her to the neighborhood museum or park on the weekends. He told her, "You're doing great, kiddo." She ruffled her hair. He tried, but the disparity in focus was obvious. Richard frequently made an effort to gently discuss it with Sarah and suggested that she spend more time with Lily. "She needs both of you." He would mention so, but Sarah would dismiss him, stating that Tommy's formative years are important. "Richard, he's very sensitive. You wouldn't comprehend." The hurt of those words hit Lily. She discovered how to suppress her emotions. She treasured the minutes Richard offered her, concealing her despair behind a fake grin. However, there was no denying the gap caused by her mother's disregard. The whole dynamic of the family had changed with Tommy's arrival. Lily struggled to find her position, while Sarah's entire world was centered upon her youngest kid. She is torn between relying on Richard's silent support and yearning for her mother's attention. Lily felt like an afterthought in her own house because of the delicate balance. Like a ticking clock, the stress in Lily's home increased. It becomes tighter with each debate. Sarah's overprotectiveness toward Tommy had become a growing source of worry for Richard, their study anchor. He saw how it inhibited Lily's sense of belonging, as well as Tommy's growth. At supper one night, Richard set down his fork while Sarah lingered over Tommy, coaxing him to eat one more bite. He whispered softly, "Sarah, we need to talk about this." Sarah squinted her eyes. "What is it about?" "Regarding Tommy," Richard answered in a cool but strong tone. "He is now 5 years old. He must learn how to take care of himself. You can't continue to pamper him." Sarah's expression instantly hardened. "Am I a horrible mother, you say?" "I'm not saying that at all. You are aware of it." Richard spoke in a calm tone. "But the world is too cruel for someone with his level of sensitivity." "What about Lily?" Richard gently retorted. "She also needs you." Sarah, however, would not listen. Despite the conflict, the quiet between Richard and Lily that followed her storming out of the room spoke more than words could. Richard remained persistent. He recommended activities that would boost Tommy's self-esteem, such as trying out for a beginner art class or joining a neighborhood children's soccer team. Sarah dismissed the notion each time, saying it was too dangerous. "What happens if he is injured? What if he is teased by the other children?" she would say. She said in a worried tone. Richard, frustrated but unfazed, turned his attention to Lily, who absorbed his support like sunlight. 3 times a week, he accompanied her to karate sessions, staying for each class and encouraging her. Lily started to thrive, proudly earning her belts and becoming more self-assured. Nevertheless, there was always an imbalance in their house. Tommy's incessant demands and Sarah's relentless attention overwhelmed Lily. Sarah hardly gave her new karate diploma a glance before moving back to Tommy's most recent crayon work when she showed it to her mother. Richard saw Lily's eyes light up with disappointment. He sat next to Lily while she completed her schoolwork one evening following another heated argument with Sarah. "Lily," he added quietly, "you're doing great. Remember that you are unique." Although Lily found strength in those times spent with Richard, they were unable to stop the increasing rift among their family. Lily felt stuck in the center of the simmering tension between him and Sarah, which was threatening to explode. She yearned for a sense of equilibrium that she doubted they would ever regain. It was a day of mixed emotions for Lily's high school graduation. Standing in her gown and hat, she looked over the throng for those she knew. Although her mother was present, she was divided between talking quietly to Tommy's babysitter and using her phone. But Richard, brimming with pride, sat in the first row. When Lily's name was mentioned, he clapped the loudest. While Sarah was busy attending to Tommy's requirements and well-being, the family got together for a modest celebration at home following the wedding. Richard drew Lily away. His voice was warm as he continued, "I'm proud of you, kiddo. You've put a lot of effort into this." Lily grinned, but there was a hint of discomfort in the air. She was aware of her life's next phase. Tension would increase at college. Seeing that she was nervous, Richard escorted her to a study. He produced a packet including brochures for colleges. He set the folder on the desk and added, "I've been saving up. You are free to go wherever you choose. Don't allow anything to stop you." Gratitude filled Lily's heart, but before she could reply, Sarah rushed into the room. Her tone was stern as she responded, "You can't be serious. Tommy should put that money aside for his future. He will require it more." Richard's face became stern. "Sarah, this cannot be negotiated. I'm going to make sure Lily has the education she is entitled to since she has earned it." Sarah began to fight, but Richard remained solid, his voice firm yet determined. With an overpowering sensation of relief, Lily stood silently. It seemed like a lifeline that someone was defending her for once. Lily finally decided on Marshall University in West Virginia. It was close enough to allow her to occasionally return home, yet distant enough to provide her the freedom she so desperately desired. Tommy was worried about her leaving, so Sarah stayed behind the day Richard assisted her in moving into her dorm, while they organized her new area and unpacked boxes. Richard stopped to survey the area. With a comforting touch on her shoulder, he whispered, "This is your new start. Take advantage of it." Lily gave a nod, excited and anxious at the same time. In years, for the first time, she sensed that she had the opportunity to forge her own path, liberated from the specter of her mother's decisions. College fulfilled all of Lily's expectations and more. A new beginning, apart from the confining dynamics of home. She felt a renewed feeling of freedom at Marshall University. She poured herself into her journalism degree and discovered that she was passionate about discovering important stories. Opportunities were abundant on college, and Lily took advantage of them all. Internships, student publications, and late-night study sessions powered by inexpensive coffee. She didn't spend much time at home, only checking in with Richard now and then. Her talks with Sarah were short and tense, but their chats were kind and encouraging. Sarah's response to Lily's inquiries regarding Tommy was always the same. "He is so talented that he only needs time to work things out, even if he is going through a difficult moment." But time seemed to be against them. Tommy, who was now a teenager, had become more and more alone. He was cooped up in his room most of the time, playing video games or browsing social media. His contacts with the outside world became nearly non-existent. Tommy had shrugged or murmured an excuse when Richard had attempted to get him to join groups or take up a pastime. Sarah strongly defended him as usual. She would remark that he is sensitive. Richard always expressed worries, saying that all he needs is the correct setting to flourish. Lily found the house unaltered when she returned for brief trips. Tommy adhered himself to a screen. During one visit, Richard discreetly tried to keep everything together, as Sarah fussed over him. Lily tried to talk to Tommy. "Do you want to go out to lunch?" Without raising his gaze from his game, she leaned into his doorway and asked. He whispered, "Thank you, but no." Lily let out a sigh as her heart sank. Though Sarah didn't appear to notice, she could see how much Tommy had turned inside. Later, when Lily brought it up, Sarah dismissed her. "He's all right, Lily. All he needs is time to figure things out." Lily, on the other hand, thrived by her final year. She had positioned herself for a bright future by landing a coveted internship at a big news organization. Her work ethic was commended by her lecturers, and her publications received notice. Some even got national publications. But every accomplishment made her realize how different her life was from Tommy's. He continued to be caught in a circle of reliance made possible by their mother's justifications while she was constructing her future. Lily made an effort not to think about it too much. She wasn't going to allow the consequences of her family's decisions bring her down because she had fought hard to forge her own path. Nevertheless, she couldn't help but worry if Tommy wanted to escape the cocoon their mother had created around him, or if he would ever do so. Lily eagerly got ready for her housewarming celebration, her first significant independence milestone. Eager to share the event, she invited her relatives. The day of the occasion, she waited impatiently while setting the table. Her heart skipped a beat as the doorbell rang, but Richard was the only person standing there when she opened it. "Where are Tommy's and Mom's?" Trying not to show how disappointed she was, Lily asked. Richard let out a sigh. "Tommy had plans according to your mother, and she didn't want to leave him alone." With a false grin, Lily opened the door for him. The discussion was casual during supper until Lily inquired, "What's going on at home?" Richard's face grew serious. "Tommy's condition is not good, Lily. He continues to follow the same regimen, refusing to go out or work and spending the entire day gaming. I have attempted to assist. However, your mother refuses to listen," Lily muttered sourly, slicing at her lasagna. "She's enabling him." Richard gave a nod. "Each time I mention it, I'm being too hard on him," she adds. "This isn't helping him, though. He's being held back by that." A flood of frustration washed over Lily. "I've put a lot of effort into getting here and moving ahead. I cannot continue to be pulled back by their decisions." "You're right," Richard remarked in a soft voice. "You are entitled to your own life. Don't let this stop you, Lily." After Richard departed that evening, Lily sat by herself in her peaceful apartment. She had a mixture of resolve and remorse. She was able to save herself, but not them, and that's what she decided to do. Richard's death came suddenly and devastatingly, like a thunderclap. Late one night, Lily was told that she had suffered a severe heart attack, much like her father had. By the time she reached the medical facility, Richard had already left. The funeral was a serious event. Sarah's demonstration of sadness was spectacular. Sobbing aloud and holding on to Tommy, who appeared uneasy and preoccupied. But Lily realized that her mother's emotions weren't just for Richard. They were for the loss of the security he had given in terms of money. The household descended into pandemonium in the weeks that followed. The debts piled up without Richard's salary. Overwhelmed and in a panic, Sarah turned to Lily even more. One evening, her voice cracking, she added, "We're barely getting by. I'm not sure how we'll make it." Tommy's, however, didn't appear to be taking the initiative. He kept spending his days devoted to his computer, either looking through social media or playing games. Every time Lily brought it up, Sarah would excuse his actions by saying, "He's under so much stress. I'm frustrated but not ready to give up on them entirely." Lily made the financial decision to assist. To pay for the necessities, she set up monthly transfers, but there was a price. With each month that went by, the strain between her and Sarah increased, and her funds for a future house diminished. During one of her trips, Lily said, "Mom, I can't do this forever. Tommy must get a job or make some kind of contribution." Sarah's answer was incisive. You have no right to discuss your sibling in such a manner. He is going through a challenging period. You will never comprehend his level of sensitivity. Lily's tolerance ran out. He's an adult, sensitive or not. While I pick up the pieces, he cannot continue to live this way. However, her words were ignored. Sarah refused to admit the issue, and Tommy, protected by their mother's constant justifications, continued to be happy with his unchanging routine. Lily was caught between her own feeling of duty and her escalating bitterness. Every trip home served as a reminder of the chaos in the family, and every money transfer made her feel depressed. It was impossible to overlook the rifts in their family without Richard, who had been the glue that held them together. The guilt of leaving them behind was a burden, even though Lily knew she couldn't bear them indefinitely. She wasn't prepared for it. She stayed for the moment. But every day that went by, the fissures in their brittle relationship became wider. While unpacking groceries in the kitchen, Lily heard a conversation that made her remain at home, even though she hadn't intended to stay long. "We're all set now, Tommy." From the living room came Candy's voice. "The house was signed over to you by your mother. There is nothing for us to be concerned about." Lily felt her heart sink. Her voice was strong and demanding as she jumped into the room. "Just what did you say?" Candy's sneer was so annoying that she hardly raised her head. "Tommy now owns the house. Didn't your mother tell you? Everything is official." After turning around, Lily strode into the kitchen, where her mother was going through a pile of documents. "Is it accurate?" With a quivering voice, Lily demanded. "You give Tommy the house by signing it." Sarah paused. She fidgeted with the papers in her hands. "You must understand, Lily." "Know what?" With a surge of rage, Lily interrupted. "That you didn't even inform me, despite everything I've done for our family. For years, I have been providing you with financial support, and you pay me back like this?" Sarah's expression became defensively steely. "Tommy need consistency. He has experienced a great deal. You wouldn't comprehend." Lily's annoyance boiled up in her voice. "I wouldn't comprehend. While I've worked really hard to establish myself, you've been making excuses for him all of your life. And you're basically giving him everything now. He needs me because he is my son." Sarah lost her temper. "Lily, you've always been self-sufficient. He needs me more than you do." Shocked by the admission, Lily stepped back. "Haven't you always favored him over me?" Story 3. My grandmother's enchantment in her small kitchen captivated me as a child. The smell of freshly made bread and pastries filled our little apartment every morning, attracting neighbors like moths to a flame. The most basic ingredients could be transformed into creations that delighted everyone who had the good fortune to taste them by her skilled and worn hands. "Do you recall this, Emma?" "Knead dough with rhythmic precision," she would frequently repeat. "There is more to good meal than just flavor. The goal is to make memories." A treasured recipe book with her handwritten notes and secrets was left behind, and her words continued to resonate with me long after she went away. Even though I was only 16 at the time, I already knew what I wanted out of life. After graduating from culinary school 10 years later, I worked in a variety of bakeries for many hours. My dream fund grew with each paycheck, bringing me one step closer to starting my own bakery. It was not an easy road. Double shifts left my feet aching, my hands raw, but I didn't falter. I saw something. I met James at that point. He entered the bakery where I worked on a rainy Tuesday morning, looking for cover from the rain. He had a disheveled appeal from his askew tie and wetsuit, but his smile was the focal point of the room. "Whatever has a wonderful scent." He raked a hand through his damp hair and muttered, "I'll take 2. I had just taken my famous croissants with lavender honey out of the oven. I put one on a platter and remarked, "You're in luck. The home has the first one." He chewed into it. His eyes widened with joy. "This is incredible. Tell me you're not married, please." I chuckled at his audacity. "Does it mean you're asking me out?" "Only if it's functioning," he smiled in response. Yes, it was. James was courteous, encouraging, and truly interested in my dreams, unlike anybody I've ever encountered. Unlike others, he didn't think my ideas to start my own bakery were unrealistic when I told him about them. Rather, he provided encouragement and insightful questions. Our romance took off right away. After 6 months, we were talking about getting married. Everything changed when I got to meet his family. James's mother, Patricia Chen, embodied high culture and old money. I felt out of place right first because of her well-manicured hair, fine clothes, and arrogance. She used her position as the property manager of one of the most prominent shopping malls in the city, Crystal Mall, as a weapon. So she began, drinking her wine at our first supper together. "Did you work as a baker?" "Yes," I responded quickly, trying not to be alarmed by her. "I've been putting money down to start my own bakery." The harsh sound of her laughter pierced the room. "Oh, sweetheart, what percentage of small businesses fail within the first year, particularly right now, James? You must be able to assist her in locating something more practical." "Squeeze my hand beneath the table, James. Emma is so skilled, Mom. She is skilled at what she does. She does, of course," Patricia answered with a condescending smile. "However, wouldn't it be preferable to have a wife who is able to go to board meetings and charity events? Someone who is compatible with our world?" I didn't answer, but her words hurt. Robert, James's father, swiftly shifted the topic, which I later found out was his go-to strategy for avoiding conflict. 6 months later, James and I were married in a modest ceremony, in spite of Patricia's contempt. Patricia was disappointed at every opportunity, since it was not the lavish event she had imagined. I was secretly pursuing my ambition of opening a bakery when I had a fortuitous encounter with well-known real estate developer Marcus Sterling. Modify everything. I'm impressed. Amazing. My vision and business plan. Marcus offered to invest in my bakery, giving me the money to start a high-end bakery and cafe idea with space for expansion rather than simply a modest shop. Patricia worked at the Marcus and Crystal Mall, which neither James nor Patricia were aware of. She threw out my application for a spot as soon as it came over her desk. "Here's a bakery," she sneered. "This is not a roadside kiosk. This is a posh mall." She was unaware that Marcus had already given his approval for my tenancy. Her denial was a trivial formality. Construction of Sweet Heritage, located in the center of Crystal Mall, started 2 weeks later. When Patricia learned that her veto had been overridden, her rage was evident. She could do nothing, though. The night before the official opening, she paused at the look of smugness and contempt on her face. "Don't expect James to pick up the pieces when this fails, and it will fail," she added. Her voice was icy. With a grin, I suppressed the truth. "Patricia, I appreciate your concern. Would you want some coffee?" "The machines are being tested." Sweet Heritage welcomed a throng of excited patrons when it opened its doors the following morning. The sophisticated decor demonstrated the ideal fusion of history and contemporary, and the air was filled with the aroma of freshly baked pastries. We sold out before midday, and we started receiving great accolades from culinary reviewers. The bakery's success was greater than Patricia's displeasure, but I couldn't help but feel a little triumph when she hurried off that morning without telling Marcus about it. It wasn't only about disproving her. I wanted to prove myself correct. My grandmother's battered recipe book was in my apron pocket as I stood in my dream. I knew this was only the beginning. At the monthly tenant meeting of the mall, the situation escalated. Patricia had planned it for our peak morning hours, so I had to decide whether to attend or supervise the breakfast rush. I went to the meeting and grudgingly assigned Sarah to run the store. Patricia was saying as I slipped into a seat, "As you can see from these charts, there are now issues with foot traffic in the North Wing, certain establishments." She hesitated, her gaze latching on May Air, generating congestion that frustrates our more established tenants. The boutique on our next door spoke out quickly. "In fact, we've seen a 30% increase in sales since Sweet Heritage began. While they wait for their orders, their customers shop." Through the room, there was a ripple of agreement. Patricia's expression became tense. Well, she gave it another go. "There have been concerns concerning smells. Do you mean the aroma of freshly baked bread?" Someone laughed and broke the silence. "It's amazing. It makes the entire mall feel cozier, according to my consumers." "What about Patricia?" Marcus, who is calm, interrupted her from the back with a firm voice. The proprietor of the mall had been watching in silence. "We've heard enough, I believe." Mall traffic has increased and Sweet Heritage has surpassed expectations. Maybe we ought to concentrate on more urgent issues. Patricia's lips were pushed when she sat down suddenly. She cornered me in the corridor following the meeting. She screamed, "I don't know how you fooled everyone, but this won't last. You're not worthy of my son or this mall, Mom." She was surprised by James's voice. He had come to have lunch with me. Patricia softened instantly. "James." "Sweetheart, I was simply worried about how much stress Emma must be under managing a company like this. You must want her to spend more time with her family." "Your constant interference is the only source of stress I experience," I answered calmly. "You dare?" Patricia snapped. "My son's pleasure is all that's on my mind." "No," James interrupted in a caustic tone. "You're considering yourself. Emma has created something amazing. Why are you unable to just assist her?" Well-timed tears sparkled in Patricia's eyes. "You've turned against me, I see. A mother and her son are strained by what sort of woman? The sort who's altering your entire mall," Marcus replied as he walked over to Patricia. "Now my office." We saw them leave. James gave a head shake. "Emma, I'm so sorry. I had no idea she was being that terrible." "You're not to blame," I said, although I kind of wanted he had noticed sooner. Before I could continue, Sarah hurried up, panting. "The review by Emma, the food critic, is now available." The review exceeded our expectations. Tremendous acclaim for our creative dishes, excellent service, and a friendly environment. By the evening, we had more clients than ever before, including several well-known food bloggers. Patricia didn't show up at the mall for several days. Gossip suggested to extended meetings with Marcus. I remained silent, awaiting the appropriate time. It happened at a family supper on Sunday night. Patricia insisted on hosting so that certain alterations could be discussed. "Cryptic," she remarked. It was a stressful lunch. As Robert engaged in awkward small talk, Patricia picked at her food. She cleared her throat at last. She started by saying, "There have been developments at work." James scowled. "What's happening?" She spoke in a tense voice. "Mr. Sterling is making organizational changes. A new property manager with new ideas is being brought in by him." "What?" James cried out. Patricia said sourly, "But it seems like you've been managing Crystal Mall for years." "Someone has convinced them differently. Someone will recognize the possibility of something greater," I said quietly. Allies looked at me. "What are you saying?" Robert inquired. I opened Sweet Heritage after taking a deep breath to regain my composure. Marcus and I met during a lecture. He saw potential in my ideas, not just for a bakery, but for modernizing retail spaces. Patricia laughed sharply. "You have big ideas and are a baker." I passed a folder over the table and responded, "Yes. These are proposals I've worked on with Marcus for over a year. Suggestions for making Crystal Mall a contemporary attraction." James's eyes widened as he opened the folder. "Public areas and festivals throughout the year." "Amma, this is incredible." "Absurd," Patricia sneered. "Marcus would never." "I've done so already." As Marcus entered the room, Patricia's face was devoid of color. "Well, I didn't, Mr. Sterling." Marcus said that Emma controls 51% of the mall segment of Sterling retail properties, which includes Crystal Mall. The room exploded. Patricia looked astonished. Robert's drink suffocated him. "It isn't feasible," Patricia sputtered. "In just 1 year, Emma has increased income by 40%. Marcus said that her tactics are changing the retail industry." Patricia said, "Are you taking over?" "No," I answered firmly. "For our expansion, you have been elevated to the position of Regional Operations Director. I also said that I'm assuming we can collaborate professionally." Patricia's astonishment gradually gave way to reluctant acceptance. "I could have miscalculated you." "You certainly did," I said. "So? What are you going to do now?" Squeeze my hand as we walked away, James. "I ought to have defended you earlier." "Yes," I said with a smile, "but what happens afterward is what counts." A silent contemplation descended upon me as we drove home. Patricia had been humbled, but I still had unanswered questions. Would her sudden acceptance of me last past the effects of the situation? What would that imply exactly? Because it had been prompted not by real change, but by necessity. The following day brought further difficulties. My everyday contacts were changed as word spread about the management changes in the mall. A few workers gave me respectful greetings. Others sent out tense looks that suggested they were afraid of what lay next. Yet beneath the surface, there was a burgeoning energy, the buzz of something fresh and promising taking shape. When Patricia returned, she had taken a week to come to terms with the turmoil. The enthusiasm for the new projects was unexpected. However, it appeared that she was more driven to prove herself to Marcus than to embrace the goal. It was progress, though. She made an appearance at Sweet Heritage before daybreak 3 weeks later. Uncertainty softened her normally perfect stance, and her high-end purse appeared more like a protective barrier than a fashion item. "We just need to talk," she said. Despite being wrist-deep in commando, I pointed to my office. 5 minutes. She waited, calmly observing while I finished the delicate laminating procedure. By the time we sat across from each other, the tension had deepened. Her gaze strayed across my office's shelves, stopping briefly on my grandmother's cookbook. "I am able to..." She started by going over the plans for expansion before measuring the successes. "The demographic data for the suburban locations is impressive." I gave a nod. "Thank you." I waited for her to speak what she had truly come to say, so I said nothing. The pearls around her neck caused her fingers to worry. She spoke at last, her voice faltering. "I must apologize to you." I didn't answer right away. I wanted to listen to her. "When James presented you to us, I was biased. I thought the person I saw wasn't mine. I believed it might hinder my son's progress. I was completely mistaken." I was surprised by her openness, but I just asked, "And now?" "Now I see someone with vision and character. Someone who picked Grace over me and used every chance to get revenge. You've created something truly remarkable, and I was totally wrong about you." I crossed my arms and reclined in my chair. "And why did you decide against it?" She answered quietly, "You did. Your behavior, your fortitude, and this location. Isn't it more than just a bakery? It is a dynamic illustration of what retail may develop into." "That's the plan," I said. "Transactions are no longer the only aspect of retail. Building relationships and experiences through storytelling is the goal." Her gaze strayed to the recipe book again. "Almost myself," she replied, referring to the morning buns. "Indeed, they make me think of the ones my grandmother made. Years ago, I misplaced her recipe. I took the book from the shelf and stood there. Do you want to witness the manufacturing process?" Her gaze expanded. "Tears are forming at the edges. You'd share that with me. Recipes from the family are meant to be shared." "We have to start there if we want to make this work," I said. Patricia Chan wore an apron for the first time at the Sweet Heritage kitchen that morning. Her first morning bun efforts were far from flawless, uneven filling, asymmetrical forms. However, her smile was real and unguarded as she bit into her first creation. Patricia's early morning baking activities became a familiar sight during the ensuing weeks. After being stunned at first, the renters started to accept the concept. Slowly but surely, our personal connection blossomed alongside our professional one. A few months later, during the second Sweet Heritage location's grand opening, Patricia was showing her pals from the country club how to make croissants. Marcus, who was observing a scene, smiled and nudged me. "Never imagined I'd see the day." "Honestly," I said, "neither did I." Within a year, 5 other locations opened as a result of the successful expansion. Each one embraced Patricia's operational experience while capturing the essence of the original sweet tradition. Food bloggers began to speculate endlessly about the morning buns, which are now a signature item. Patricia stayed after we closed the flagship shop one evening. "Emma, I've been thinking about your community idea," she added. "Oh, what if we extended it? Classes in cooking, maybe teaching people how to create their own scamming traditions?" I grinned. "That is a great concept, in my opinion." Her hub was unexpected, but warm. "Thank you," she said in a whisper, "for continuing to believe in me." I thought about life's greatest victories, which are frequently mine, and the relationships we create as I drove home. It took more than just establishing a successful company or disproving others to achieve success. Honoring my grandmother's legacy and fostering growth in others, Even those who resisted were the main goals. When I got to Sweet Heritage the following morning, Patricia was already there. "I was thinking," she added, her apron coated with flour, "perhaps we could make something that tells your story or a special pastry for James and your anniversary." "Our tale?" I made a little correction. "The sweet and the bitter." She grinned in comprehension. "Yes, everything." The aroma of new possibilities permeated the air as we worked side by side in the warm glow of the morning sun. It was more than simply a fresh start for the mall or the bakery. It was a fresh start for all of us.